welcome to Telltale. I'm Emily. And
I'm Joe.
and he is my husband. He's going to be joining me today because we are going to be discussing a very, very interesting story called It's a Good Life by Jerome Bixby. Um, so, Joe, how about you tell us a little bit about Bixby?
He was a novelist and a short story writer predominantly. He was born in 1923, died in the late 90s. He's mostly more well known for his television screenplays. He did write some Twilight Zone. Most famously, he did write some Star Trek, the original series with William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy. He wrote Day of the Dove. He wrote one of my personal favorites, Mirror Mirror, and also another one that he wrote, which was called Requiem for Methuselah.
Mm-hmm.
And he later kind of expanded on that with his last work, which was The Man from Earth, which he actually wrote on his deathbed, and it was completed by his son after that. And it was famously made into an independent feature in 2004, I believe, or 2007. It was made in 2007. But that one's really good too.
Yeah. So he is, for modern audiences, more well known for his screenplays and, of course, film scripts. But he was originally a short story writer and novelist. So It's a Good Life has a pretty interesting synopsis. It is about a town in rural, middle of nowhere,
It's
countryside.
Peaksville, Ohio.
Peaksville, Ohio. I already had forgotten the name of the town. But like if you grew up in the country, this was a very like typical setting. It was surrounded by cornfields and just this really little isolated town in the middle of nowhere, Ohio. And it is, as you're reading the story, you kind of see everybody's really catering to this young child who kind of has like a little violent and angry streak. Everybody's tiptoeing around him, and you don't find out why until a little bit into the story that this young boy has amazing psychic powers, I guess we could call them.
Mm-hmm.
Some unusual mental powers where he has kind of trapped this town and made it unable to like function unless it's to his own will. So how old was he again? Like 10?
In the short story, this is the interesting part, because we are going to talk about the Twilight Zone episode that this
super
was adapted
important.
into.
We will not fail to mention it.
In the short story, Anthony Fremont is only 3.
Yeah, so he's a really, really, really young child. And of course, what makes this story so horrific is because he's so young, he has no concept of empathy, not a lot of concept of compassion. He's still very much developing his personality and understanding social constructs. So a lot of what he does is entirely for selfish reasons and is perceived as kind of evil. One of the things that he does is he kind of reconstructs animals to be grotesque creatures, and when he's done playing with them, he just kills them.
In the short story, because his Aunt Amy, because she's like one of the few people that he actually gets along with, in the short story, she has this big fear of rats, so he actually uses his ability to exterminate the rats, and it's actually kind of grotesque in the short story. He mentions that he makes a rat devour itself.
Yeah, so he has some pretty sadistic streaks, even though he's doing it for the sake of his aunt. You aren't quite sure if he's just young or psycho. But of course, this entire town is just trying to please him because they know that they could just as well be destroyed by this kid if he doesn't like what people do to him. So he kind of like just makes them disappear.
It's not just that though.
Away.
Also the title of it, Good Life, and people are always saying before you even realize that Anthony has these powers, they say, oh, it's a good day, Anthony. It's a real good day. It's like, it is, you don't really necessarily understand that, but then you realize as the story progresses that the word good is not good. It actually doesn't fit to its traditional meaning. It's become, it like loses all of its meaning because these people are merely using the word to keep good thoughts in their heads to not make this little child angry. So
Yeah, because he's also a mind reader. Even if you think like, oh, it's too hot, because he controls everything, including the weather, the crops, animal life, what is and isn't on television. Like this kid controls literally everything.
it's also important to note that what happens in the story is that the moment that the boy was born, he had actually used his powers to separate Peaksville from the rest of the world. But the people to that day never knew if Peaksville was sent someplace or if he destroyed the rest of the world and only Peaksville was left. All they know is that they can't leave the town. And as far as they're concerned, there's nothing outside the town. And a lot of their like food supplies and stuff like that have to be done by hand. Like crops have to be grown. There's a part in the short story where they infamously talk about the last can of soup or like the last few bottles of liquor that are around there, and then they had to make homemade wine, which they said wasn't very good.
Mm-hmm.
But you actually, in the short story, you get a better feel of how socially isolated this small town is. And I think Bixby really captures that feeling of isolation in a small town, even though in real life, of course, people in small towns aren't nearly as isolated as they are, but he actually does encapsulate the feeling of it in this by putting in a science fiction story.
Yes, this is an extremely desperate town too. Like you just see, yes, they're all catering and trying to make this little boy happy, but this little boy is eliminating all food sources that he doesn't like, which are substantial. Like he has zero understanding of how much of what he's choosing to do is actually going to have huge consequences on his community. He's just doing what every selfish kid does when they're still developing their own personality and stuff, which is try to push limits, be sassy, try things that are, different. And if he doesn't like it, no. And he just happens to have these powers that make it very easy for him to just make whatever he doesn't like go away, including people and dogs. At one point, he eliminates a dog.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a naughty dog. It was a bad dog because it barked at him, and I think it bit him or something too.
Yeah.
So he just makes them go away, and everything just disappears. Like they just cease to exist. People he doesn't like cease to exist. His own family is terrified of him, and it's just really frustrating. Like to kind of read this because it's like that's the horror of it is a child doesn't understand consequences by that age. So everything he's doing, he thinks is a good thing, and everybody's affirming it, but they're enabling him. Nobody's scolding him or telling him it's a bad thing because he's got this angry streak. So it's just a really desperate situation of trying to balance out, like, okay, well, how do we please this child and not die?
That's the thing I noticed, like, not just in science fiction, but in horror stories in general. This is actually one of the reasons why children make fantastic villains.
Absolutely.
For that kind of stuff. Like, another good example would be the 1976 film The Omen, with the little 6-year-old Antichrist. And then there's also the 60s sci-fi film Village of the Damned, which was actually based off of, I forgot if it was a short story or a novel, The Midwich Cuckoos, about these children, otherworldly aliens, and they have these kind of psychic abilities and whatnot, but they don't have necessarily the kind of social upbringing or social cues needed in order to kind of maintain the status quo or to maintain any kind of standard of human morals.
Absolutely, because they have no concept of it. Like human psychology, like they learn those things from their social interactions. It becomes like a societal construct, which is kind of reinforces this idea too that kind of like the island of Dr. Moreau, where the only reason things are kept in order is because we have rules and laws that people are willing to, for the most part, abide by. When a child is put into that situation, the rules and laws are only what they want. It's just such a creepy concept.
It is.
I don't trust children anymore, ever. They're all evil little pears. I'm kidding.
I don't know if they could make It's a Good Life today, though.
What do you mean?
I don't know. It's just like the way Bixby wrote it out, especially if they wanted to be, I'm sorry, closer to the short story than as, say, the Twilight Zone episode that was actually based off it. Because the Twilight Zone episode, which we are still going to talk about, is extraordinarily tame compared to some of the stuff in the short story.
Yes, there were some things put into the story that the film could not necessarily depict for legal reasons.
Yeah, because I mean, it's just that with the way Anthony Fremont is written as a 3-year-old child these days audiences like a nice kind of full circle, no explanations there. A 3-year-old child leaves a whole bunch of holes in it, in that he's kind of innocent because he doesn't really know any better. What audiences today really like, especially not just readers but movie watchers and everything, what they really want is a villain who actually decided to be evil so that he can be punished accordingly by whoever the protagonist is.
See, I don't know about that because I feel like there's a lot of ambiguity there. I don't think he's necessarily an evil character per se. I think he's a naive one. But as humans, we are kind of caught up in this social construct that we not only want to protect the innocence and naivety of children, but we simultaneously scold them for it too, as part of the learning process. So we're kind of caught in our own catch-22. If you're a parent or anything like that, I'm sure you experience that feeling where it's like you want to protect them from things, but you also get really ticked off when they just aren't understanding, and then you turn it into a learning process. What we're dealing with in this character, yes, I don't think he's innately evil. I think he's enabled.
Yeah. Well, also, we don't really get much character development from Anthony Fremont, though, in the short story.
I don't think you need to, because he's very basic. He's a child. He wants what he wants. He wants to get rid of what he doesn't like. What more character development do you really need for a child who's 3?
And yeah, exactly. That's just what I was going to say, that he is a 3-year-old kid, and how much character development can you get with a main character at that age, though?
Yeah.
You know?
I don't like, I do like. Do not want, get rid of. Like, that's a pretty, like, I think in our basic form as humans, we can totally, like, empathize with that because we've been those kids before where it's just like, I don't want to share. Get rid of the reason to share. All gone. Goodbye. You know, like, I think there's, especially, like, if you're a young kid who had a younger sibling who was born, there's a lot of conflicting feelings if you're old enough to kind of have a lot of very complex feelings about this new child being brought into your home. Yeah, you're excited to have a new playmate, but then mom and dad pay more attention to the baby because it's more needy, because it has all these basic needs, and you just don't understand those sorts of things. So I think that's what made it so horrifying, is it really wasn't the kid who was the monster. It was everybody who's choosing to enable him instead of gently telling him, here's why that's not good, though. People will die, even the people you love. Like, I feel like if they had approached him and just said, you know, even the people you love will die if we can't get food here. If we have to do it all ourselves, we will not be able to make this sustainable. Like, I felt like there were enough characters that he would at least listen to and respect enough, especially his aunt, that could tell him, hey, listen, this is why this isn't good. And I feel like he probably would be like, oh, like, you can explain empathy to a child and suddenly it clicks. In most cases, unless they have, like, some mental health issue or something, or, like, have autism or any kind of thing like that. Sometimes it's a little more difficult. But in this case, I felt like the kid was pretty normal, that if you sat down and said, hey, if you ever want alphabet soup ever again, you know, get him with the things he likes. I feel like it would be a very easy manipulation in this story.
As the story progresses, though, you see that the citizens of Peaksville are more in survival mode than anything. Like, they're not enjoying life. They're like, okay, what do we do today? We don't make this kid angry.
But we still have to somehow conduct our own lives and make sure that we're growing our own food and make sure that... So we had some technical difficulties where a majority of what we wanted to talk about regards to the Twilight Zone episode ended up freezing and getting cut off. So...
Or was it? Maybe Anthony Fremont did something to the computer because he doesn't want the world knowing his story.
What a 3-year-old dick. Anyway, so we actually decided that in the midst of all that, trying to figure out what was going on with that we're actually going to... We're finding there's a lot that we want to talk about as a compare and contrast with this Twilight Zone episode, episodes. So, thanks for watching. We will see you next time for part 2, where we discuss a compare and contrast between the Twilight Zone episode and the short story. So, like, subscribe, be ready. We're pretty excited about what we got to say. So, we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.